All right, let's look at some of a handful of common and maybe some not so common liquidity and solvency ratios. And I do want to point out one thing before we get started. We're going to be doing some computing. We're not going to necessarily be interpreting these ratios. And the reason is because to give any kind of meaningful interpretation to the ratios, we really need to compare these year to year. And in the interest of time, what I'm going to be doing in this video is simply showing you how to compute these ratios. You do need to also make sure that you understand the difference between, or the purpose of, a liquidity and a solvency ratio. Also, I would conclude by just saying that there are other liquidity and solvency ratios. So we're just going to be looking at a small sample of those. All right. So this is an actual exercise, and as I've said many times, don't let the fact that we're dealing in euros worry you, because that doesn't matter. So we have a company, Siemens, which is an actual company, and we have some data 2015 through 2017. And if we look at requirement A here, it says compute the current ratio for each year. And then also, and so the current ratio is a major type of liquidity ratio. It's probably the most heavily used. It says also compute the operating cash flow to current liabilities, or as we call it, the OCFCL. This is not a common ratio, but we're going to do it because it's part of the question, and hopefully you can see how this might be useful. Ratio for each year. And then we also have to add this bit of information, and we're going to need this. In 2014, current liabilities totaled 36,598, and these figures are in millions, although I won't be adding all of the zeros. Okay, so in the interest of time, we are going to be looking only at the year 2015, but if we know how to do 2015, then we should be able to handle 2016, 2017. So the first thing that we have to do here is we have to understand what the formula is for the current ratio, and it is simply current assets divided by current liabilities. Okay, so because we are looking only at the year 2015, we're going to plot 51,442 over current liabilities of 39,562. And by doing that, bring the calculator over here real quick. 51,442 divided by 39,562 equals, expand this out, 1.3. 1.3 is what that says. And that is rounded. So this is our current ratio for 2015. All right. So the second part asks for this operating cash flow to current liabilities ratio. And so in order for us to get that, if you look up here at the chart, you might guess that we're going to need the cash flow from operations. And if you Thought so, you would be right, but let's get the formula down here. So it is cash flow from operations. I'm kind of abbreviating here. And we are going to divide that by the average current liabilities. Okay, so we look up here and our cash flow from operations 2015 is 6612, and so we look for our liabilities at the end of 2015, and that's 39,562. And then, if we were doing 2016, we would take the average between, we would add, we would actually have 42,916 first, and then we would have 39,562 here, and we would divide by 2. But we have to use 2014, and so they have provided us this figure right here. So 36,598 divided by 2. So let's see what that is. Let's get our calculator over here. $39,562 plus 36,598 equals 76,160, and then we're going to divide that by 2 to come up with 38. Let's see, what is it? 38,080. And so, clear this out. 6612, which is our cash flow from operations, divided by our average current liabilities, equals 0.174. 0.174 rounded. Okay. So what we're essentially saying here is that when we look at the average liabilities that we incurred over the past year, and that figure was $38,080, we have cash flow from operations 6612. So cash flow from operations is 17.4% of average liabilities. So this is a measure. This is a measure of how well we're doing with our earnings, right? How well we're doing with our earnings, considering the level of debt that we are using here. Okay, so we would want this number to be as high as possible, and especially if it's a number that is sustainable. So 0.174 is better than 0.171, but not as good as 0.176. Okay. All right, and that's really all we have to do, because again, we don't have the time to go through all of these years. Okay, so requirement B says that we need to compute the times interest earned and debt to equity ratio for each year. So, we have the let's see here. We had the current ratio, which is a liquidity ratio here for 2015. And then we had what they call, let's see, let's put this in here before we get started on the next one. OCFCL for 2015. This is a solvency ratio. And so we're going to look at a liquidity ratio and a solvency ratio here as well. All right. So the formula, let's do times interest earned first. Okay, so let's just come up here. Again, we're using the year 2015. So our formula is pre-tax income plus interest expense and we're going to divide that by interest expense. All right, and this is times interest earned. Okay, and so if we look up at our chart, we have pre-tax income for 2015 of 7218, and we're going to add to that, let's see, where is it? Interest expense of 818, and we're going to divide that by, oops, sorry about that. We're going to divide that by 818. Okay, so again, I think I had the paper pulled down a little bit too far, so let's do a quick review here. Times interest earned is pre-tax income, and so we use this 7212 right here, and then we're going to add to that interest expense. So that's where we got the 7218 and the 818. This is pre-tax income, this is interest expense, and then we're going to divide by interest expense. Okay, so let's just bring this over here and do that. 7218 pre-tax income plus 818 interest expense divided by interest expense gives us, let's see, 9.82 rounded. 9.82. This is times interest earned for 2015. And then the second part of this was the, let's see here, debt to equity ratio. All right, and so for the debt to equity ratio, we're going to use total liabilities, not current liabilities, but total liabilities over total equity. Okay, so we're going to come back up here to the chart, and let me move this calculator right quick, at least part of the way. For the year 2015, our total liabilities are $85,293, and our stockholders' equity is $34,474. All right. So $85,293 divided by $34,474. So let's just see here what that is. 85. Let's see, 85,293 divided by 34,474 is going to give us rounded 2.47. Debt to equity ratio 2015. All right, so final word on these figures. As you go through and you seek to develop an understanding of these items, some of these items we want to be as high as possible, and others we want to be low. So with the current ratio, 1.3. This is a little low for our current ratio. We would like to see this be higher, but the most important part is that higher is better. The operating cash flow to current liabilities ratio that we calculate, and again, this is not really a very important one. It's not a commonly used one. We don't see it a ton. Again, we want that to be as high as possible. Times interest earned. We're using some fractional algebra here where we have the interest expense in both the numerator and the denominator, and so you know this is a measure of interest expense to pre-tax income, and so this is another ratio that we want to be higher. So think about it like this: if this was, instead of being 818 was say 618, this ratio would actually go up. I don't know to what, but it would in fact go up. Okay, and so that's a good thing. But over here, the debt to equity ratio, well, for every dollar of equity, we have $2.47 of debt, and equity is the essentially is net assets, or the owner's claim to assets, right? So we want this number to be as low as possible. All right. Okay, so keep that in mind. Do the rest of the exercises. Go back to the video, take a screenshot, whatever you need to do. That'll wrap up this video.